welcome and thank you for coming. This is multi-cloud management, Stratos and Kubernetes. There's been a lot of Stratos demos going on at this conference, and this is going to be the best one. Because we're going to show you, because it's in the project update track, we're going to get to show you some things that are not in any release yet, that I saw for the first time today, stuff that's underway.
Yep.
Oh, I got the thing.
Yeah, you do. Doesn't work, but you've got it.
What the?
Down. You need to go down. Boom.
I'm Troy Topnik. I work for SUSE. I'm the product manager for SUSE Cloud Application Platform.
And I am Neil MacDougall. I also work for SUSE, and I lead engineering for the Stratos project.
Okay, so we heard a lot from Abby this morning about how we have to adapt quickly to change, how we have to be very nimble kayakers. And it's because our industry is constantly evolving, moving very, very fast. Now, when you're going to set out to make a software project, especially a software project that is going to draw in a very large community and hopefully a big user base, how do you design that? How do you build it in a way that has a high adaptability quotient? This is a term that our SUSE CEO is fond of, and it just means that can be resilient in the face of change and things that you can't predict. So we think that these are some good guidelines, and I'll explain why we think this in a moment, but I think the obvious one, especially at a conference like this, everyone is a believer of the fact that it should be open source from the start. Of course, SUSE is a firm believer that everything we do should be open source from the start. But open source in a framework, especially when we're dealing with a web UI, in a framework that is popular, that a lot of people know, so that so you can attract developers to the project. Especially if you can choose a web framework that people in your particular community are going to be familiar with and use. We want to design our interface with contracts that are kept between the interface and what's actually doing the work behind the scenes. We want to use the public APIs, the published APIs, instead of going directly in and dealing with internal components like internal databases and so forth. We design with the future in mind, and we keep an open mind because we don't know where that future is going to lead us. And hopefully we can make it extensible so that ultimately we don't have to do all of the work ourselves. People in the community can contribute in a way that doesn't require them to be core contributors. Now, the reason we believe this so strongly, some of us in this room were part of another web UI to Cloud Foundry, which was not open source, which used a framework which was invented specifically for that project, and nobody else but the inventor of that framework knew. Got right into the internals of Cloud Foundry and internals of the databases that were being used. Designed sort of with the future in mind, but maybe we didn't predict exactly what the future would bring. We had an open mind. We didn't make it extensible. So we learned this lesson very hard. This is a long time before Stratos came along. Now we have Stratos. Stratos, of course, being the web UI for Cloud Foundry, and has just...
Yes, we've just graduated out of incubation, so we'd been an incubated project previously. We're an official project. So that was last month.
Yeah, but it's been in the works for a while, and from the very earliest days, since a couple of years ago, we had a design in place that made it very adaptable for Cloud Foundry. And with these abilities to adapt to new APIs and multiple API endpoints, what should we do next? We have a really great UI for Cloud Foundry. What should we do? And a little bit about how this affects us at SUSE. What was I going to say here? So we have a containerized version of Cloud Foundry, what you've maybe heard a little bit about, SCF, SUSE Cloud Application Platform. It's deployed to a Kubernetes cluster using Helm. So that's kind of, at least when we first released it, we were the only ones doing this. And so when we wanted to build a UI, we initially built Stratos as the interface to the Cloud Foundry portion of this puzzle. People were running containerized workloads on Kubernetes beside, or we anticipated that they would. But initially, Stratos' mandate was to be the interface for Cloud Foundry. And of course, we run on different flavors of Kubernetes, and we have to take that into account at some point. So what this talk is really about is how we have extended Stratos to actually be a UI, a unified UI between the Cloud Foundry API and the Kubernetes API.
Yes, so just leading off that point about extensibility, one of the things we kind of designed into Stratos at the start was to make it extensible. So we have a first version of extensibility. I'm not going to go into detail, but the point really here is we have a way of being able to add in new functionality into the front end. So those could be UI views. You can change things like the login. You can change the theme. We can support what's called new endpoint types, and we'll touch on that in a second. And you can also extend the back end. So this is the part of Stratos that we make API requests to, and those will then get proxied onto the relevant service. So we have quite a good extensibility model, and that's really an enabler for what we're talking about today. So, as Troy says, we have customers, developers that want to deploy using Cloud Foundry and also manage workloads in Kubernetes. So hey, let's extend Stratos, right? So we have Cloud Foundry support in Stratos, we have Prometheus here, we have some metric support. Let's add support for Kubernetes, and while we're at it, let's add support for Helm. So with Kubernetes, what we've done is we've added a new endpoint type using the extensions mechanism to support Kubernetes. So you can register and connect in your Kubernetes cluster. And again, we've added support for different authentication mechanisms, so you can do that for Azure, Gkey, SUSE, AWS, all of those. And we've got some initial views that are really kind of targeted at, initially with our own sort of SUSE cloud application platform. So you can look at, you have that deployed, how's it running, you can get some metrics. And over time, we want to build those out. We've got some ability to look at namespaces and pods, and we're adding some more functionality around integrating other open source projects like the Kubernetes dashboard. Prometheus, so if you use standard Stratos, you can already connect Prometheus and you can get Cloud Foundry metrics. We have a Helm chart for Stratos metrics. That also lets you connect in the Kube node exporter, so you can get metrics for Kubernetes. And then within the UI, which we'll show you in a sec, you can also get, you can see the sort of graphs for Kubernetes metrics in a similar way that you see the graphs for Cloud Foundry. And then finally, Helm, this is something we've added in fairly recently. So we've integrated Monocular, which is an open source project, which is a sort of catalog browser for Helm charts. And we'll show this. So the stuff we've done on top, you can add Helm repositories. We've modeled those as endpoints. You can browse and view charts. You can install a Helm chart, view releases and release detail and delete release. So this is kind of the Kubernetes equivalent of creating an app through Stratos. Helm is the kind of I guess it's the most popular package manager for Kubernetes at the moment.
So, as I mentioned, the Stratos project is part of Cloud Foundry. And these are the things that are features of both. Of course, they're open source in both repos. So we actually consume the upstream Stratos really well. We consume our own upstream project. But Stratos in the Cloud Foundry org is open source, so is the one in the SUSE org. They do all of the same things, but the one that ships with SUSE Cloud Application Platform does a couple of other things. It's of course branded for SUSE, uses images based on SUSE Linux Enterprise, and it's got these two important extensions that we're going to talk about, the one for Kubernetes, which was released a little while ago, and a new technical preview of a Helm UI extension as well.
Awesome, so let's switch to demo. I am still there.
Just out of curiosity, how many people have used Stratos before here? How many people who are not at SUSE have used Stratos before? Well, that's good. How many people have seen a Stratos demo, either at this summit or at a previous? Okay. Oh, good, good. So this is new for a lot of you. We have a few Stratos sessions at this one, and so I just wanted to get a level set of what people have seen and what people haven't.
Okay, so this is SUSE Cloud Application Platform Console. It's our distribution of Stratos. You can see it's obviously got a different theme. We've modified it, so some stuff we've done recently. You can add a custom kind of welcome page here, which is what I've done for the SUSE version. That's a bit more instructive, hopefully. And you can actually see on the side nav, if you're not familiar with Stratos, normally on the Cloud Foundry version, you would see the Cloud Foundry nav, just to help guide you a little bit. With the version that we have with SUSE, we don't necessarily have people that want to use the Cloud Foundry. It's perhaps optional. So now you'll only get the side nav items when you add an endpoint that has relevance. So this is an empty system. I'm just going to connect a couple of endpoints just to show you that it works the same for Kubernetes as it does to Cloud Foundry, and then we'll switch to a system that's pre-populated just to save a bit of time. So let me just grab a URL. So this is just a test Kubernetes I have. It's a mini cube. So just as you would with Cloud Foundry, if I click Add to Register Endpoint, you can see in addition to Cloud Foundry and metrics, I have a bunch of other endpoint types. There's really one endpoint type, which is Kubernetes, and we have a notion of subtype. So these are all a subtype, and all this does is make it a convenience that when you then click on it, you will see the authentication mechanism appropriate to that type. I'll go ahead with a generic Cloud Foundry. This is a mini cube. And you can see, because this is the generic almost auth, I need to provide my certificate and key. So this is obviously different to Cloud Foundry, where you would use the username, password, or SSO. So again, this is where we've allowed you to have pluggable auth types. I can go ahead and connect. And so now I've got a Kubernetes endpoint in the same way that I'd have a Cloud Foundry endpoint, and you can see I have Kubernetes appearing in the side nav. We'll skip that for a second. And I will just do the same for Helm. So with Helm, obviously there are Helm repositories. It's essentially just a web server that serves up an index file and a bunch of resources to go with the charts. And there are a number out there. SUSE has one for its products. There's this one here, which is like the stable Helm charts, where people publish charts for things like MySQL, MariaDB, all those kind of things. So I go ahead in Stratos, the same as with the kube endpoint. I can choose Helm, and I can put the URL in, and you see now that Helm appears on the left-hand side. I've got a Helm repository as an endpoint, and it's slightly different here. It's synchronizing that repository into Stratos' backend so that those charts will be available. So that's trying to show you how we've managed to sort of represent Kubernetes and Helm as endpoints using the same mechanism as Cloud Foundry.
And this is, speaking of it being adaptable, one of the recent changes here is that you can deploy Stratos without a Cloud Foundry endpoint, which is a requirement for a certain class of our users who want to use it with Kubernetes. We have this great extensible, flexible UI that we can adapt for a use case that we hadn't thought of a year ago.
Awesome. So I'm going to switch. Here's one I've prepared earlier. So this is a more interesting system, right? So I'll jump down to endpoints. So you can see we've got a couple of Cloud Foundries registered and connected. We've got EKS, Frankfurt, Kubernetes connected. We've got a metrics that's providing metrics for both Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes. And then we have 3 Helm repositories that we've added. So those have added and they've synchronized. And so you can see this one has got all of the side nav you'd expect. So we can dive down, we can either click Kubernetes or we can click here. And it's worth saying the same as Cloud Foundry. If I go back, actually, when you go to Cloud Foundry, for example, for these features, you obviously have to select context. So you would see the same with Kubernetes, right? Here, because I've only got one, I go straight in, but I can register multiple Cloud Foundries. So if I have a GKE that I use for some workloads, or an EKS, or even a local CASP or other Kubernetes environment, I can register them all in and easily switch between them. So I've gone into this cluster, and this is the kind of the summary page, I guess.
Yeah, and how many people have actually seen the application aggregation view? So I actually want to just show a couple of these things. So in the same way that we can aggregate or we can see views of the different endpoints, we can actually see the things on those endpoints put together. So these, I think, are all from both of those Cloud Foundry foundations that this is hooked up to. One running on EKS, which is Cloud Application Platform, and the other one is IBM's Cloud. And it brings them all together, and we can filter based on which foundry it belongs to or substring matches. We can deploy from this interface. But we'll now, I think, go through to the Kubernetes views. The things we surfaced first in this were the things that we thought were the most important in Kubernetes for operators of the system to consider. Things that we found as we were developing Cloud Application Platform that we had to check a lot when we were monitoring workloads that were running on Cloud Foundry. Are the nodes healthy? Are we running out of memory? Basic things. And we can drill down a little bit into the nodes themselves. I think in this one we can go into a node and, for example, see all of the pods running on it. Drill down into those pods to see some metrics on individual pods over different time frames. Going back one, we could probably see the metrics for the entire node and see what our resource usage is over time. And again, these are things that are being exported in the Stratos metrics chart via Prometheus. Namespaces. That's another way we can drill down to get to another path we can take to get to the pods. So if we're thinking in terms of not the nodes, the physical nodes that these things are running on, but rather what namespace we deploy them to, we can get that at them here too and see aggregated view of, for example, all of the services that are existing in this namespace. We can do it by individual pods as well, see which services a pod exposes.
Yeah.
The applications view here is actually Helm literate. So this interface to Helm deployments predated the Helm extension. So this is one way to take a look at Helm deployments, but we're going to actually take a look at the Helm view as well, because that offers a slightly more sophisticated way. Now, the first thing you do when you click on the Helm view is you see an aggregated view of all the Helm charts that are available in all of the Helm repos that you've connected to, all of those endpoints. And just as with the Cloud Foundry applications that come from different foundations, you can filter based on which Helm repo they're coming from. You can also search them. And then when you've decided that you've found something that you want, let's go to the stable repo. And let's try the first one, Aerospike. It's a NoSQL database. We pull in, did you want to talk about the features here?
Yeah, so this browse part is obviously our integration of Monocular, which is, as I said, the open source UI for Helm catalogs. We obviously have to do work around that in terms of integrate that into Stratos with the endpoints. What happens is when you add it, you synchronize in, so we have the chart, we're able to present the chart README that you see here, you grab the chart icon. Charts can obviously have versions, so I can go through the version history, I could click on a particular version to see the details about that. Often you'll see they're the same, but when it comes to installing, obviously I will install that particular version. So I'll just go back to the latest. So we can browse charts, as Troy said, search charts, and then we can install charts. And this is where we do work beyond what the Monocular project does. So you can see, because I've got Kubernetes connected, we add this option to install from the UI. So you can browse, you can find a Helm chart that you want to deploy, choose the appropriate version, come in here, and then you can hit install, right? And again, I've only got one Kubernetes cluster registered with this system. I've had multiple. I could select which one, then I can choose a name for this. Oops. I can use a namespace. I'll just put it into default, hit next, and here is where I need to specify the Helm chart value.
This is something I really had to thank Neil for, because if you've worked with Helm before, the switching between the README file in GitHub, the values YAML file that gives you the defaults, especially if you're a new user, it's a little bit overwhelming and you don't know where to start with your values YAML file. You don't know what the defaults necessarily are. If you could edit it in the same view as you are when you're deploying it, that's great. So do you want to click on the...
Yeah.
So this will actually, in the same way that we get the README file from the repo, we get the default values YAML from Helm. So you can get in there and examine what values are set to begin with and modify those ones that you want based on what your desired outcome is.
Yep, so I'll leave it alone for now. I can go and hit install, and we will then, via Helm, actually install that chart and create what's called a Helm release. And so you can see the other Helm releases that I have in this cluster, but also the demo one that we've just installed. Click on that. It's probably still installing, so there's one pod, one container's not ready. So let's go back and look at something maybe a little bit more interesting. So you can see here we've got some of the SUSE Cloud Application Platform packages or releases. So here's SUSE Cloud Foundry.
A little bit bigger than the little Aerospike deployment that we did. But we can see some of these high-level things, how many pods are running, how many containers make up those pods. Yeah, go ahead. The notes is a convention from Helm where after you finish a Helm install, this is actually sourced from the values file. It will spit out basically a rendered version of what you need to do to connect to it. Basically, like, now that you've deployed it, this is what you need to know to use it. And this is the output from a Helm install of SUSE Cloud Foundry. And these are the values. These are the values YAML that this particular instance was deployed with. All of the pods we can see here, and this is my favorite actually, especially because Cloud Application Platform exposes so many services internally. This is a much easier way for me to see what's going on in the cluster rather than working with kubectl to try and dig down. I can see it at a glance, what's going on, and maybe if there's an issue there.
Yeah, and we can go back and, I think this thing's still coming up, but we go ahead and delete from here as well. So we can go ahead and delete that demo release that we've created. And again, we'll use the Helm API to do that, and you see it's gone. And there's more we want to add here in terms of supporting Helm upgrade. It's worth mentioning that this is using Helm 2. So
this is hugely important. Thank you for reminding me.
So if we go to config, one thing we can do here, we'll go across all of the clusters you've got connected and just tell you which version of Tiller is installed on those, or if Tiller's not installed. And you didn't see here, but with other Kubernetes environments, because of the proxying through to the Kubernetes API and then through to Tiller, it can be a little bit slow. And so with Helm 3, Tiller goes away. And also they add things like JSON schema support into the charts. So what that means for us is that YAMLs interface that we had with the raw JSON, we can read the JSON schema and we can present you a much nicer UI that has, instead of you providing those values as JSON, you can use web controls to enter those, and they can work against the JSON schema. And we already have that functionality within the Cloud Foundry part of Stratos. So you may not have seen it, but when you deploy a service or bind a service, if that service has a JSON schema, then we will present a form. So we will do the same thing for Helm, and it'll be a nicer experience.
We might also want to put a confirm deletion on the Helm as well. Just thought of that. Feature request.
Just install it again. It'll be fine. So I think that's probably it, isn't it, in terms of those two? How long we've got? Shall I show a couple of really new things?
Very, very new things. These are the things that I just saw very, very recently.
I'll do this real quick. I think we've got 5 minutes or so. So this was back to my little test system that I set up. So what we're trying to do is obviously build out the functionality, and like you saw we integrated Monocular, we're trying to kind of leverage open source, and we'll be contributing back to various projects. As a kind of initial helper, one thing we've done is integrated the Cube dashboard. So hopefully this will work. Give it a second. Awesome. So we will proxy through using the Cube API to the Cube dashboard service, and we can embed the the UI directly within inside of Stratos. I don't think this is on here yet, but we can then, from some of the views we showed you with Kubernetes, link through to this dashboard. So a good example is in one of our views where we show namespaces, we can have a link that will take you through to the Kube dashboard with that namespace already selected. So it's just a little bit of a developer convenience, particularly if you've got multiple clusters registered. It's very easy then to switch between those clusters, quickly get into the Kube dashboard, do some work, pop back out again. So this is something that we hope will be useful, and we're looking at other ways we could integrate this more directly. Other thing we've done recently, is OpenCube console. So what we'll do here is for the given cluster, we're going to spin up a pod in the Kube environment that Stratos is deployed in. That pod is obviously running a container. That container is off of an image that we've created that has the Kube CTL command and the Helm command pre-installed. We will then inject the Kube config for the cluster that you've selected, and then we'll also add all of the Helm repositories that you've got registered with your Stratos system. So hopefully, it's taking a bit of time there, don't know why.
This is so awesome because quite often you'll find yourself in situations where maybe you don't have all of the clients installed on the system that you're using at any given time. So you can always come in here through a web interface and get a kubectl and a Helm client and pre-configured to talk to your clusters. We could totally use this at the booth.
Yeah, so this obviously I can execute Kube commands. I don't have to worry about Kube config or setting my context. Helm, you can see the name was the name I registered it with Stratos and the URL. So I could, from here, stuff that you can't do easily in the UI, I could jump in easily, create namespaces, install Helm charts from here as well. So hopefully that's the sort of thing we're trying to add that adds a bit more value, makes it easier for people to again, they've got their context of the Kube, they can jump in, do stuff, jump to another one, do stuff very quickly and easily. So that's some stuff we added fairly recently. As Troy mentioned at the start, the Helm functionality is kind of in tech preview. This will be coming along in a future release soon.
And it's tech preview partly because this big change in Helm is coming. There's actually the Helm Summit is going on at the same time in Amsterdam. And so very soon we're expecting Helm 3 to arrive, and that's, as Neil mentioned, the client-only implementation. So it reduces complexity for us. It's going to be great, but it does mean a change in Stratos and some work that we have to do.
So I think that's it for demo. We've got a couple of minutes. I think we had a couple of closing slides. So just a little bit on looking forward. So we've talked about extensions. Up until now, Stratos has a particular way of doing extensions. We're in the process of changing that. What we want to do is allow people to build their own extensions and maintain them in their own repositories. And then when you build a version of Stratos, you can choose which extensions that get included. So at the moment, both the Kubernetes and the Helm are inside of SUSE's version of Stratos. We want to be able to pull those out, have them in a separate repo. There's other components like the autoscaler UI inside of Stratos that we will do the same with. And then we're hoping that we can make available more of these extensions. When somebody builds a Stratos, they can kind of pick and choose. And we're continuing, as kind of Troy said, to build out a K8 Kubernetes support. So we'll be updating Monocular, contributing back to that project. We'll be looking at the Kube dashboard integration that we've shown and see if there's a better way of doing that. And then we'll be looking at what feature set we should be building inside of Stratos around Kubernetes that complements some of the other tools that we've talked about. I'll skip that one. So I think
there's more.
There's more.
So there is an introduction to Stratos session going on at 5:15. That's our friend Peter Anderson and Rob DeCanyon-Knight, one of who's here. And tomorrow we've got Stratos Project office hours. So if you are interested in being a contributor to this amazing project, can come and see us in the lounge. And then there's this Stratos Project update. It sounds a little bit like this one, but that's at Yangtze too tomorrow at 3:40.
Yeah, so these are all more about open source. Well, it's all open source. These are all about standard Stratos, right? So what we've talked to you about today is the stuff we at SUSE have done on top of the standard Cloud Foundry Stratos. It's all open source. There's nothing hidden. There's nothing kind of proprietary. You can take everything we've talked about today and you can go and use it. You could fork the SUSE repo if you wanted, or you could take what we've got there, add it to your Stratos. These are the sessions that relate back to the core Stratos, so I'm happy to talk about SUSE stuff if you want to know about these things at these sessions. The project update will be talking about what we've done to Stratos over the last few months and where we're going, particularly around some of the extensions pieces I've mentioned. Office hours is a good time to come and find myself and Richard. We both work on Stratos. If you've got any questions, then come find us. And as you said, the introductory talk, if you're new, please come along to that. We'd appreciate it. Thank you, yeah. Yeah, I don't know if there are any questions. We can take them now or... Yes. Oh.
Sorry, say one more time.
Is there a way to deploy a application by Helm on multiple clusters?
Not yet. That's not a bad idea. The question was, is there a way to deploy a Helm chart on multiple Kubernetes clusters, presumably at the same time?
No, we don't have that, but that's, that's something that could be done, I guess.
That could definitely become a feature request. If that's a use case you have, I'd like to hear more about it.
Right.
It will become a feature request.
Cool.
One more question. Is there a way to use Stratos in a CI deployment pipeline? So it doesn't have a REST API that I can trigger the deploy from the pipeline?
Well, you can always, if you build a pipeline that can deploy a Helm chart, you can do that. Am I understanding the question right?
Yes, but with the advantage to deploy on multiple clusters, I would like to use Stratos to deploy on multiple clusters and at a single point to request. So that would be interesting setup.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. We don't have that at the moment.
No, that's interesting.
So I should say we've got, obviously, the two GitHub repos, right? So the kind of Cloud Foundry version of Stratos that's part of the community is, github.com. It will be Cloud Foundry /Stratos and the SUSE /Stratos. We use GitHub issues to track feature requests and what we're doing. So we love to get people putting issues in, saying what they would like to see. And if they do that, then we can consider those and sort of work with you to prioritize those. If we don't know what people want, then we obviously can't build it. But we're in that stage now where we're really looking at the next set of functionality. So if you've got great suggestions like this, then either just put them in or ping us on Slack. So it's not mentioned here, we do obviously have a Slack channel, #Stratos on the Cloud Foundry Slack. So find us there, put a GitHub issue in, and we can work with you to kind of flesh it out a bit and start to implement.
Thanks so much.
Awesome, thank you.